Haunting heights, when Christmas lights meet chilling frights. 10 months out of the year, I paint houses. But during the holidays, I decorate them. Rich families pay my team top dollar to hang lights on their mansions. But money isn't everything. And after this year, I'm never going back to the Dumont house. Every town has its haunted house. This is ours. While the origin story varied from suicidal stockbrokers to tragic holiday accidents, everyone agreed the place was haunted. Each year when the old widower calls, we draw straws. The two losers get stuck with the job. This year, it was Marco and I. We pulled up to the old Victorian and set our sights on the home's 4-story turret, looming over the property. We'll start from the top, and work down, I reasoned. Marco held the ladder, and I started up with the strand of lights. The ladder flexed under each step, and tried I not to look down. As I passed the highest window, I caught a glimpse of movement between the curtains. Probably Dumont, checking on my progress. I reached up for the gutter with a plastic clip in my hand. The ladder jerked back from the house, almost throwing me off. Shit! Marco yelled below me. I tried to throw my body weight forward to avoid the point of no return, when the ladder would topple over backwards. Despite the effort, I felt myself moving further away from the eaves. By chance, I looked downward, and what I saw made my blood run cold. The window I had passed on my climb was no longer closed. A woman leaned out of the opening, clutching the side rails. Her golden hair was stained a dark color on one side, where it was matted to her head. She looked up at me with an expression of twisted contempt as she pushed again, sending me further from the house. The ladder came a little closer to toppling, before teetering back toward the turret. The woman adjusted her stance. I immediately realized what she was doing. She was going to try pushing me sideways, where Marco couldn't stabilize the ladder. Before she could, a second figure, a man in blue coveralls and a yellow cap, shoved her through the open window, before slamming the sash with a loud thud. Her form evaporated into mist as soon as her entire body left the house. The ladder clattered back against the building, leaving me clinging to the rungs with sweaty palms and a hammering heart. Back on the ground, Dumont offered me an apology, and a wad of cash to keep quiet about what I saw. I refused both. Marco and I packed up our gear, and left without a word. As we pulled out of the drive, I looked back up at the window. It had opened again. That same woman stared down at me, bony fingers curled around the sill.
His parents thought the voices were only in his head. Thomas was the kind of boy who'd give you a hand if you fell off your bicycle. He'd ask you if you needed help going home. He was also the kind of boy who'd wake up drenched in sweat every once in a while. He'd tell his parents everything is fine, it's just a stupid nightmare. But parents keep worrying, that's their job. It wasn't until the 7th grade that Thomas finally spilled the beans. He told his parents about the voices in his head. Naturally, they visited a child psychiatrist. Dr. Brand was a well-renowned consultant, and after a few sessions, he diagnosed Thomas with a rare early-onset type of schizophrenia. His paternal grandfather, although nobody admitted it, wasn't exactly well-adjusted in the head. Indeed, some form of mental illness or another ran through his paternal lineage. Thomas took the drugs, but the voices didn't go away. They merely became louder and more sporadic, more urgent. They spoke in a language he couldn't understand. Thomas would reflexively cover his ears, but to no avail, and start crying. The psychiatrist prescribed electroconvulsive therapy, where they tie him down and run an electric shock between his shaved temples. Needless to say, the burn marks took their time to fade away. The school became a tough place for the kid. His classmates taunted him about his illness and shaved his head. And Thomas grew quieter, often sitting in the back corner, staring outside the window, daydreaming about exploring the bottom of the ocean. A few years had passed, and Thomas had gotten used to the voices. They'd sometimes get too loud, but the electrical therapy never failed to quiet them. He also grew more familiar with the sounds of their strange language. They were sounds no human can produce, but they showed a pattern. Like listening to whale songs or dolphins. Having taken a liking to music in high school, Thomas decided it was time to at least deconstruct the voices. He began replicating the voices using his computer. It took a lot of time, but he managed to create a specific segment. The same segment that would grow so loud and more repetitive that he'd need electroconvulsive therapy to dampen it. Looking at the spectrogram, with pauses, rising and diving pitch, it certainly resembled a sentence. Yet it was impossible to decipher. And so he posted it online. That's how we met him. He narrated his struggles with schizophrenia on a support forum. We started texting back and forth about the segment he reconstructed. He didn't believe that other people heard the exact same voices. He was even more shocked when I shared a segment another member reconstructed. It took a while for him to absorb the truth. We've all been labeled crazy since childhood, but we discovered that we weren't. Yet it was far from over. We all felt the voices growing louder and louder, but we didn't know what they were saying. And nobody believes us.
I accidentally planted tomatoes in my sister-in-law's garden. Danny and we like to get away to his brother's coastal home as often as possible, mostly because it felt like the only place where we could pretend our marriage wasn't falling apart. And since we didn't have enough money to go away this summer, thanks energy bills, Danny asked if we could stay there for an entire fortnight in July. That place was the lap of luxury, outdoor jacuzzi, heated floors, home cinema system. The only part off limits was the rear half of the garden, which my sister-in-law, Angie, was trying to turn into an organic farm. Although, in 3 years, she hadn't sprouted a single sapling. The first Friday of Danny and I's stay, Mike and Angie arrived unannounced. Said they'd cleared their schedule so they could join us for the weekend. On Sunday evening, as we sat in the hot tub enjoying those perfect bubbles, Angie carried over a cheese board and some tomato chutney she made. We all agreed it tasted incredible, but she was irked by the fact that she needed to go to the greengrocer for the tomatoes. That stubborn garden just refused to cooperate, she said. After they left on Monday, Danny stomped around, stinking the place up with his shitty mood. I kept asking what the problem was until, finally, he fawned over Angie, the flawless wife. He pointed out the way she kept climbing out of the jacuzzi to top up Michael's wine, and how she cooked all these special meals for him. I countered that he returned those favors with romantic shoulder massages and surprise roses and that he even had nice abs, to which Danny replied, "It's easy to stay in shape when you can afford a personal trainer." We argued around the house, our tempers escalating until the situation got so hairy I found myself grabbing a butcher's knife for my own self-defense. On the drive home, I texted Angie photos of my bruised neck, said I'd left Danny, and that I hoped I never saw him again. Mike was an emotional wreck. You would be too if your own brother vanished without a trace. I told everybody that, I don't know what happened to that violent prick, but I'll bet he's too ashamed to show his face. All communication from Danny's family basically dried up after that. Until a few months later, when Angie invited me to a party at their coastal place. The second I knocked on the door, she dragged me into the garden, past the guests crowded around a picnic table. See, she wanted me to see that something finally grew in that damn garden of hers. And as I watched the guests dig into a giant bowl of salsa with their tortilla chips, a moist sickness slid up my throat. Because in the middle of the soil bed, a lonesome tomato plant grew from the exact spot where I'd buried Danny's mutilated corpse. And the last thing he ate was Angie's tomato chutney.
I overheard my girlfriend whispering to our cat, "Testing, testing. Is this stupid thing working? Maybe you can hear me. I don't know. But if you can hear me, please listen. My name is Maurice Ashley. And, shit, wait." Alright. They didn't hear me. My name is Maurice Ashley, and I'm a resident here at the Redburn Retirement Home. Right now, I'm in the cleaner store, surrounded by bleach and wet floor signs. You've maybe seen Ollie the therapy cat on TV. He's the little grey bastard who naps on residents before they die. After he predicted some deaths, he got featured on the wrap. But the story's not the puff piece everybody thinks, and that's why I'm making this. Wait. Okay. So, Diane and I, we were together. That's Diane Newell, Newell. We kept our relationship quiet, because she's a church elder. We were in her room after lights out, when she heard something out in the hall. She flicked on the lamp, and made me hide behind a coat rack over her by the entrance, and then opened the door. It was hard to see in the dim light, but through a gap between these two jackets, I could make out Ollie strolling over there onto Diane's bed. She broke into hysterics and sat beside him, and from the way she talked, you'd have thought she was bargaining with the Grim Reaper. Out of nowhere Ollie's eyes went red, and his fur became jet black, and that blackness kept growing like some sort of living ink blotch. I swear, that thing latched onto Diane's skull. She tried to scream, but it was like the scream got ripped right out of her lungs, like her damn soul was getting sucked out through her mouth. 1 minute she's in agony, clawing the air, terrified. The next she's completely lifeless. Then suddenly the shadow shrunk back down into a normal cat again. The furry bastard just curled up on Diane's chest, purring away. This icy blast came over me, and I backed up and knocked a picture frame onto the floor by mistake. Out of the corner of my eye I saw Ollie's head whip toward me, so I flew through the door and ran like hell, with the speed of a man half my age. And now I'm hiding from a fucking monster cat. I can't get out of here, because the doors get locked after lights out. And if the nurses see me in this state, they'll probably tie me down to my bed. Then I'll be sitting cat chow. I know this sounds loony, but whatever that thing is, it feeds on humans' essence. Maybe that's why it haunts a place where nobody is surprised by so many of us dying. I don't know. My only choice is to make a break for it. But in case that thing finds me, tell my grandkids that I shit. Wait.